Hi, Rhodians! Welcome to the Road to 40. This is episode 100. We have a very special guest with us tonight, Chris Castanes. We are going to bring you waves of geekery that will wash over you and help you sleep tonight.
Certainly.
Yep. So what do you want to talk about?
Well, something that's been a big influence, at least for me in my life as a nerd or geek or as a human being, has been sci-fi. And I mean, look at all the sci-fi we like. I mean, you're obviously a large Star Wars fan.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Big Star Wars fan. I myself am a large Star Wars fan.
Also a Star Trek fan.
Not so much of a Star Trek fan. Well, I do recognize the importance of Star Trek.
I do. I can accept that. Yeah.
Star Trek was an extremely important show, whether we like it or not.
Right. Certainly.
I can't say I love Star Trek because I'm not too keen on the original series.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just too cheesy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I have a lot of the same issues with Doctor Who that I have with Star Trek.
I can agree with that. I remember watching Doctor Who like a long time ago, like late 70s, early 80s, and I remember being so creeped out by that.
It's a creepy show.
It really is. Like, I haven't watched it since then. I haven't watched any of the newer ones, but I heard it's pretty damn good. But
I mean, it has a large cult following, and that must mean it has some merit. I mean, that's the way I look at all fiction at this point. I mean, if people like it, there must be a reason for it.
Right.
And that's why I hesitate to say that I hate a series.
Mm-hmm.
More or less, I'll find that I just am not particularly attracted to that series.
Yeah, even Star Trek. Like, I don't hate it. I can see how people would love it.
There are some great episodes of that show. It's just, it's mostly not that fun to watch sometimes.
Yeah, it's just not my ball of wax, I think.
I mean, I do love some episodes of Star Trek. I mean, especially ones where they're more horror-like. And that's more or less in, like, The Next Generation.
Yeah.
DS9.
That's what I'd like to see, is The Next Generation, because
that's a great show. That's my favorite Star Trek
if
show.
I was going to watch one, that would be the one I'd want to watch.
And that it's darker than the original series. It's more realistic.
Well, you figure that's probably like 30,
it's easy to be more
40
realistic than the original series.
Yeah, it's not too hard.
And I mean, as for Star Trek, I mean, of all of them, I mean, this might disappoint you, and it disappointed me as well. But Star Trek has had the most impact as far as technology.
I can see that.
More so than Star Wars.
We'll just look at like cell phones.
Yeah,
actually, we've surpassed Star Trek at this point, but they did lead us down a path.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Right.
They created the technology that would eventually be kind of turned, like, it allowed scientists to pretty much say, I've watched this show, let's build it. And with Star Wars, it's harder to do that because Star Wars is so much more fantasy-like.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot kind of like a Kurosawa film in space, like a Japanese samurai film in space with magic. It's very Lord of the Rings-ish in a lot of ways.
That's probably why I like it, because I'm more of a fantasy fan.
That's what I love about Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And the reason Star Trek is also a little bit more open about what the different races. Star Wars has a lot of mystery behind it.
They really do.
It's a lot of it's non-canon. A lot of it's non-canon. Like, all of these books that exist about it, George Lucas decided to say no.
See, that I really feel was bullshit, because people spent a long time collecting and reading all that stuff.
I have my own list of things that I consider canon for Star Wars, including Death Troopers, which is my favorite book
I don't know if I've ever seen
about Star Wars. That is the only zombie Star Wars book that exists. And it is a great book.
Did you read the Grand Admiral Thrawn series?
No, I did not.
Timothy Zahn. That, to me, that should have been canon, because it was so well written and it wasn't over the top. It was only 5 years after the New Republic had been formed. Now there is no New Republic.
No New Republic.
That's awful. That is awful. You're terrible, Disney.
New Republic.
Disney and Lucas, you can all go to hell.
But I mean, with that though, like I don't really care what Lucas says or Disney says. If it's canon, if I want to believe it, I believe it.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
That's what it comes down to. And
and
we looked at we have to look at where Star Wars came from as well. Like, Star Wars came about 10 years after Star Trek's release.
Right.
I mean, not to say that Star Wars is just taking stuff from Star Trek, because it didn't. It's very different.
Yeah, very different.
But I don't know if Star Wars would have been publicly accepted the way it was without that.
For Star Trek.
I don't know if it would have been as accepted. So I think I mean, it's one of those things where Star Trek even owes a lot to the earlier shows.
Oh, Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And those owe their debts to the novels written
know,
during the 19th century, like Asimov and
yeah, that's pretty crazy.
very,
It goes back that
very
far.
different.
All right, so if there's one sci-fi item from any of the shows, anything you've ever watched that you could own, what would it be?
It would be the gun from Blade Runner.
Wow.
That is my absolute favorite item.
Now, I have to admit this, I've never seen that whole movie.
That is a movie you would love. Because it is a movie about Han Solo. It's obviously it has Harrison Ford in it.
Right, right.
And it's kind of like a cop movie in the cyberpunk setting where he's hunting androids. And it's the book that it was based on is called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yeah, yeah.
And it is just an awesome movie. And there are like a million different versions of it.
Yeah.
And it is in the same universe as Alien.
That's pretty sweet. I didn't know that.
It is in the same universe. Ridley Scott made both movies. So.
I must watch it at the wrong time of day. I always want to watch it at night, which seems
Don't
proper.
watch that movie at night.
No.
Even though it is set at night, that's the reason you're going to fall asleep.
I always fall asleep every single time I watch it, and I get about maybe a quarter of the way through, a third of the way through.
Because all the action-y kind of stuff happens like in the middle to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it is awesome. Like, there's just some awesome lines. This is the most iconic scene in that entire movie at the end. I'm not going to say anything about it. Because me and you need to watch that.
I would definitely watch that.
Yeah,
I've been dying to see it.
It is without a doubt my favorite sci-fi of that genre.
Wow.
Of that genre, at least.
That's saying
of
a
the
lot.
cyberpunk genre. I mean,
Yeah.
of the spacefaring genre, my favorite sci-fi is obviously going to be Firefly.
Yeah,
But as
that's
far
what
as
I
films
figured.
go, it's got to be Star Wars. Because Star Wars, for me, is so ingrained in my childhood
Yeah.
that, I mean, I just have to love it.
That's the thing with me is I remember, that's like I've said on here before, my first memory is going to see Star Wars in the theater, and like I was very young, but my uncle was there and I think my father was there, and I just remember that like being the first thing I can remember going back. So,
Yeah. And I was too young, of course, to see Star Wars in the theaters, except for the newer ones, which were a big disappointment, to say the least. But
heartbreakers.
But I remember seeing episode 4, 5, and 6, and I was very young. I remember watching when I first saw Star Wars. I had known about Star Wars forever, though. Like, you always know the lines like "Luke, I am your father."
Right, right.
And
well, that's another influence on like our generation.
And people who have never seen Star Wars, sorry, know that line.
Right, right. You can't not know that.
You can't not know that line. But
hope that's the dogs.
yeah, that's definitely some type of mutant trying to get in.
Uh-oh.
But Star Wars, man, had everything going for it. They really did.
Yeah.
And I remember watching episode 4 when I was very young. It was like in the winter or something like that. That's when I saw all of them. So episode 5 and me have that was my favorite movie.
Oh yeah,
episode
absolutely.
5, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
It has to be my favorite sci-fi movie.
Yeah,
of that genre.
So too, definitely.
Because it is just brilliant. I mean, it has Hoth. It's got Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, the dynamics of that movie are phenomenal.
It's got Han Solo and Chewie and Leia, and it's got Lando Calrissian.
Yes, it does.
And it's got the ridiculous amount of deals that did not go Lando's way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Empire was just phenomenal. I remember, like, I appreciate it more, like, as I've gotten older, too, than I did when I saw it the first time. Because I remember seeing it and being like, wait, that's how it ends?
Yeah, that's how it ended.
What are you doing to me?
And then they released episode 6.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I was like, this is great. Except for the Hutt Palace thing.
Oh,
and the Ewoks.
Have you ever seen the original untampered with?
Yes, I have that version, and I love that version.
Those are, I'd be happy if they just brighten those up a little bit, crisp them up.
Yes.
Don't add anything else into it.
But they're not going to do that.
No.
Unless J.J. Abrams has something.
Right,
Which
and
he
at this
may.
point, well, what do you feel about the rumor with J.J. didn't get asked to direct 8 and 9? because they were pushing him for that December release date. Did you hear this rumor?
I did hear about this, and it's actually fairly reliable rumor.
That's pretty. Yeah, I think so
I know
too.
I heard that someone else is directing the newer ones.
Yeah, that's disappointing. Like
I love J.J. Abrams' work. He does a great job. I mean,
Yeah.
I really liked Star Trek, and the Star Trek that he did.
Lost. I love Lost.
And Lost is great, and he just did a lot of different movies and shows that we just love. I mean, he did a great job. I mean, he's been able to resurrect Star Trek the way I hope he's going to resurrect Star Wars.
I hope so too.
And hopefully without all the lens flare.
I've heard from everybody that's on the set that they're remarkably pleased with the way that
I've seen things from the set, little videos, and they're using practical effects.
I know, that's awesome.
That is ridiculously awesome.
I don't mind CGI at all. Like,
yeah.
There are places where I don't think practical effects work as well as CGI, but for the most part, I prefer practical effects.
I'm a kid of the '90s, and you're a child of the '70s and '80s.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was a time where practical effects were at their peak.
Yes,
like, that's where
Dark
they were
Crystal
good.
and
Dark Crystal is one of my favorite movies.
so
Legend.
Yep.
All these movies where you have just excellent practical effects, especially horror movies.
Oh,
where you just had the greatest practical effects.
That's a topic all in and of itself. Horror movies.
I love discussing horror movies, and we may get into that a little later. But I just think that George Lucas, during episode 1, 2, and 3, decided that he didn't want to think about a plot.
Yeah.
He just wanted to write. He just wanted to have movies being released.
Have you ever watched the guy that reviews those movies? He has a 7-part series for episode 1.
Wow.
It's like an hour and a half long, and he's being silly about it, but everything he says is making so much sense. You're like, he's right. Like, where is the plot? There's no plot. Like,
George Lucas decided to rely 100% on his CGI.
Yeah.
And that's not cool. But I mean, he created Star Wars, so what?
I'm not disappointed that Disney owns Lucasfilm.
Oh no.
Now. Because now I know that my kids and my grandkids will always have
there'll always
Star
be a
Wars
Star
future.
Wars. There'll always be a Star Wars. And Star Wars has been immortalized by Disney.
That's awesome.
And I'm kind of glad they ripped it out of George Lucas's hands.
I do too. He, it's time. I think
he needed to retire.
Look at all the movies like Pirates of the Caribbean that they put out. That was a really good movie. Like, I mean, they went a little downhill after a while.
Yeah, but they were still fun.
Right, right.
They never lost their fun.
So.
But I mean, those are great movies, and I just really hope that Disney's able to do the same with Star Wars.
I think they will. They're not stupid.
If they screw this up, they've lost. Like, they have to do.
That's a $4 billion investment.
I know, and it's part of it could either be one of the greatest moves Disney has ever done in their entire lives.
I mean, now they own Marvel.
Yes,
they own.
They own almost everything.
Think of the crossovers they can do now too.
Yeah.
It's a little weird, though.
Speaking of sci-fi and Marvel and Disney, Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's interesting. I'm more and more interested with it every day.
Yes.
I never read the comics.
I never did either.
I'm going to now, though.
Any movie that has a raccoon in it as a character
that talks
is something I will check out. Without a doubt. I mean, it just has to be there. And Vin Diesel's in it. He plays a tree dude.
Oh,
Groot.
yeah.
Groot,
yeah.
And he only says Groot, which I guess is a good
like
one.
Hodor?
Yeah, he's like Hodor. Hodor. But,
yeah, I can't wait to see it. It's the first Marvel movie that's ever come out that I'm like, why are they making this? I don't understand.
But I like that they're making
yeah, and the more and more I see, I'm like,
has
this
a lot of
really
different, like, Firefly-ish kind of feel
Yes,
to
it does. It really does.
And it also has a very Star Wars-ish kind of feel. It has the grittiness that Star Wars has.
Yeah.
It has that feel when you look at the ship.
But it's
there's rust all over this bucket. It's just a piece of trash floating in space.
Yeah, I hope that's good. I hope that's good because I'd like to see more and more Marvel. Like, that's funny to me. Like, I remember like collecting comics, early '90s to like late '90s, and I had a huge collection. I had like 14 boxes, the long boxes, just tons of them. And I read everything. Like Marvel, I preferred Marvel over DC, but I did read Batman and Superman, I think. And I remember reading the Star Wars comics and the Dark Horse comics. Those were really fantastic. So
I know, and now that we have all these new films, it's like people are remaking these films.
Right, I know they're already rebooting.
And I think that's kind of a shame.
I do too.
Because especially with things like, I mean, I liked that they're making a new Godzilla film.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked the movie. I really did like Godzilla, but for a person like me who's been obsessed with Godzilla, I mean, Godzilla was my superhero. Like, I didn't care about Batman or Superman when I was a kid. It was Godzilla. But, like, I just think that Godzilla...
Creature double feature. ...was
a character that... I mean, I'm glad that we remade it, but I would just kind of like to let Godzilla sit.
Yeah, I think it's at that point. They remade it, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and that was terrible.
Yeah, it was not good.
And then this one came out, and I haven't seen it yet, but...
It's very good.
Heisenberg's in it, so...
He is. Bryan Cranston is in it, and he does a great job for the parts that he is in.
I heard most people who saw the movie wish they saw more of him and more of Godzilla and less of everything else.
That's pretty much exactly it. But people have to remember, that's the formula that all Godzilla films have had since the beginning of time.
Right.
Every Godzilla film has been like 30, 40 minutes of just boring crap that nobody cares about, and then the rest of the movie is just about Godzilla tearing stuff up. And that's what we care about. And then they're making the new Jurassic Park.
Oh, Jurassic World. Yeah.
And I am not particularly very confident.
I'm not either. I want to believe in it because...
I want to believe.
I remember... See, here we go. This is perfect example of where CGI makes sense.
Yes.
Jurassic you couldn't Park. Do the things you did with
CGI. You couldn't do a T-Rex.
Right. I mean, you could do a standstill one or one that moves a little bit, but you couldn't do something that chases after a Jeep at 35 miles an hour or whatever. Like, that makes sense to me. Yeah. And I remember the very first time I saw that, I was with my friend Corey. We were in Taunton, and the first time you see the Brachiosaurus, they're eating from the trees, and then they put their foot down, and all the base of the whole stadium
the theater.
Man, that was awesome.
I saw that movie when I was very young. I mean, that was one of them. That and Godzilla were my childhood. Jurassic Park is an example of a movie that did CGI perfectly.
Yep.
It did it without a doubt perfectly. Like, this movie just did it.
Where CGI needed to be, it was, and where it didn't need to be, it didn't interfere.
Yes, and I liked that.
Yeah. That's why, like, I have to hold out hope for Jurassic World.
I do.
But you're probably right. Like,
well, I'm going to do the same that I did with Godzilla. I'm going to have a low expectation.
Yeah, just go in with that, and then maybe walk out pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key.
Yeah.
You got to do that.
I haven't seen anything new. Oh, wait a minute. I did see Days of Future Past. Did you see that?
I did not.
That was pretty good. I mean, it was off the comic a little bit, but it was good. Enjoyable. I think that's the thing, too, is... Like we were just talking about, the DC, or rebooting.
Yes, rebooting.
Superhero comics. Well, somebody made a good point the other day. I was talking to them about it, and they said, if you look at the comics, they do the same thing in a way, where they either reboot or there's other alternate universes where things happen. Like the Age of Apocalypse, like the new X-Men movie next year, I think Bryan Singer has signed on to do it. Is Apocalypse.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to do Age of Apocalypse, which was a really cool comic series. But it's just neat because you can kind of take, Man of Steel, then you can take Superman, and then you can take the new Superman that they rebooted, and you can kind of look at it that way. Smallville. Smallville was one of my favorite shows of all time. Not the best show in the world, but one of my favorites. And... those are all different roles of Superman.
Yeah.
So, when they reboot, Spider-Man or, Batman, I kind of take it that way now. I'm like, okay, well, that's another incarnation.
Yeah, it's another incarnation of of this. And that's the way I'm going to look at the new Stargate films that are being made.
I never saw any of that.
Stargate is without a doubt my favorite sci-fi of the TV genre. Of that type of... Not so much Firefly in that area, because I consider that more of a miniseries. But Stargate had, because I'm a history nerd, I love history, and Stargate has that. It has the Egyptian gods in it. It has the Norse gods. It has, but they're aliens.
Oh wow!
So the ancient aliens, it's like the Ancient Aliens show, but real.
That's awesome.
And you have the ancient Egyptians who get taken over by the aliens thousands of years ago, and they revolt. And nowadays, we've got a gate that allows us to go to other worlds. And there's no ship. There's no ship in this show.
No ship.
No ship. There's a gate. Well, there is a ship later on.
Right.
But there's a gate. And it's like and it takes place nowadays. It's like, it's the most relatable characters. Like, it just takes place in a period where you're comfortable with. Like, and the characters are so outmatched by the enemy that it's ridiculous that they do the things they do. But it's such a great show. Like,
now there's been so many of those, hasn't there?
I only consider SG-1
SG-1
my favorite.
Okay, is that the first one?
That was the first one.
SG-1. I gotta write this down.
It's a great show. It's campy, but it's not. It has that.
Wait a minute. Is it Buffy campy?
No.
Okay, because I could not get.
It's
into
not
Buffy.
that campy. I couldn't get into Buffy either. It's serious, but it has a budgety kind of feel to it. For the first season, it's like they put all their money into it, and then the second season,
probably so they'd get picked up.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, we got to recover some of the loss from the first one, and then it got better, like really good. But they're really interesting episodes. Like, they're very different from Star Trek.
I'll have to check it out. I need to start expanding what I'm watching too, because Carol and I have been like, normally we have our shows that we watch, Walking Dead, or Game of Thrones, but they're all off TV right now. Even Family Guy and all those.
Yeah, nothing's on. You have to watch old stuff.
Yep. So now I need something like
Stargate
this.
is a great one. But
I'll never get her to watch it though.
Yeah. Well, Stargate's a good one because it has like, it's just got it's extremely. It does not take itself seriously sometimes. It is very humorous show. But it is at the same time very actiony and very. It's like you see these weapons now from nowadays and characters that are using equipment that exist.
Isn't that crazy?
But they're fighting creatures or aliens and that don't look terribly too different from us, because they're not. But there's a lot of story elements there that I'm not going to get into because this is not about Stargate.
Spoilers.
And plus, this is not about Stargate.
Yeah, that's another one. So Next Generation, I need to watch.
I really recommend The Next Generation. I think you would like that because of all the sci-fi shows that exist, it is the most grounded in reality. But at the same time, it's got really interesting races and cultures and storylines.
I like that a lot. So, how would you define? I have my own answer in my own head, but sci-fi and how would you define fantasy? How do you separate them?
Well, fantasy is generally what I consider, at least, to be a world that is fictitious, more so than. Yeah. I mean, it is a universe that is fictitious. This takes place somewhere in another being or place in existence. This is not our realm of existence. Right. And whereas sci-fi generally takes place during somewhat, it doesn't have to be within our existence, but its basis is on science.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas fantasy is based on myth and legend.
Okay, all right.
So they're very similar in a lot of ways, but it's kind of like the difference between science and religion in the ways that they are.
Right. See, that's interesting. Like, in my mind, and I know I'm not right necessarily, I've always thought of fantasy as medieval dragons period, like that sort of thing.
Which
and
sci-fi does not actually.
It doesn't. You're right. And I've always pictured sci-fi as being space.
Yes, I consider Star Wars fantasy.
I think you're right. I
really do because, and that makes Star Wars very unique. It really does because it is one of the only that does that.
Yeah.
It really is. Like,
well, the whole Force and the Jedi and the Sith. It is
It's
exactly.
Shaolin magic. That's kind of what it is like. It's like you have these Jedis who are pretty much like Shaolin monks.
Who was it that directed Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon?
Oh, I cannot remember his name.
I can't either. But I would love to see him direct a Star Wars.
That would be great. It would be great for him to make a movie about the beginning of the Jedi.
Oh, it'd be a work of art.
Yeah.
It would just be beautiful to watch.
Like,
oh my God, please do it, Disney, please, because Disney's watching us.
Oh yeah,
right now.
they're like, we care what Jason has to say.
Yeah, they're third in line after Sony, Warner Brothers, and then it's Disney. They're like, we want to pick this guy up, put him on TV.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of shows out there that are really great. There's a lot of TV. There's a lot of film. That's great for sci-fi, but to be honest, the most complex series that exists on the planet, in my opinion, most complex.
I think I know where you're going.
I'm not a terribly awful fan of this because I can't freaking understand it. Is Dune?
Oh, Dune! I was wrong. Yeah, F that, I have no desire to read those books. Like,
they
I'd
are
like
so
to.
complex.
I wish I could just smush them into my head. I mean, maybe I could do audiobooks.
It's such a great universe.
I'm sure it is.
It is such an awesome
just
universe.
Too big for me.
It's just like the guy who wrote it just went insane. That's pretty much what it's like reading it. I think he kind of did, but it's one of those books where when you read it, it's like, this is the ravings of a madman, but it's, I mean, it's a storyline here.
Right.
But it's like all these cultures really exist. It's like he's writing it, assuming that people know what these factions and cultures are. And it's awesome. It's like you're getting a textbook, or not a textbook, but a legend from another universe. And it's just
it's
wonderful.
Creepy.
It's creepy. But the universe is so well developed.
The funny thing is, I remember when they did the movie way back in like the 80s, and I never saw it, but I remember thinking the only thing I remember about it was sand and deserts and a worm. That's it. That's all I can remember of like seeing.
And
like, the movies.
that movie did not really do a great job.
That's what I heard. I heard though there's like a 12-hour director's cut or something
and
crazy.
It kind of doesn't do it either.
Really?
The best show for that is Children of Doom.
Children of Doom.
That Children of Doom is the name of one of the books, but it encompasses the entirety of Doom. Huh. And it is the only way you can understand that book.
Is reading Children.
Is watching the movie Children of Doom.
Oh, watching
the show. It's a miniseries. And it is great. Like, it just is wonderful.
Yeah, I'd like to. You know what else I want to read? My friend Pete, when he was down. He said to read Jim Butcher's Dresden Files.
That is a great one as well.
Is it?
And the show for that is pretty good too. But
is it?
The book is better.
Way better, I definitely want to read those. I have the first one on hold at work, but I need to run by Books on the Avenue to see if they've got a used copy, because we don't.
I've only read a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I haven't read. I looked at a copy in a store and I was like, I could really get into this book. But I didn't have any money on me, so I didn't buy it.
The character, Dresden, or this wizard or whatever he is, like, he sounds really interesting because the way it opens up, there's a new post office delivery person who's bringing him his mail. And the guy's like, oh, really? Do you do birthday parties? Because on his door it says wizard or magician, or something like that, a wizard. And he's like, nope. What kind of wizard are you?
I'm a wizard.
Yeah. He's like, really? Can you do that? And I thought, like, wow, I really, immediately, that interaction, I was just like, wow, this is going to be a good book series.
But, I mean, there's the RPG, World of Darkness.
Yeah.
It's very much like that, but it's much darker, obviously.
Wow.
But, I mean, World of Darkness includes things like, Dresden Files includes things like demons, and at least in the show, it includes things like demons, vampires, werewolves, and stuff like that. Right. World of Darkness focuses on that.
Yeah.
And you can play as a mage in that. There's a mage in that is kind of like playing as the Dresden Files.
That's pretty sweet.
It's a great system, but I've played it so much that I don't want to play a game with that for right now.
I think we should talk about role-playing games.
Yes.
However, I'm going to cut this at 28 minutes. I like to do this just in case we get a crash or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we'll pick up on the second half of episode 100, where we're going to talk about role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons and World of Darkness and your mother. All right, we'll be back in just a moment.